Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Breakfast Club episode 35. We are welcoming back returning guest, Dr. Lauren Esposito, the California Academy of Sciences Curator of Arachnology. Hey, Lauren.
Hey.
So I hope that you are all doing well out there. I was looking at the last time, Lauren, that you were on the show, and you were literally our second ever guest. So this was April, and everybody's hair was like 4 inches shorter. And back then you came on to talk about arachnid sex, reproduction. But this time you are going in a different direction. You're going to talk to us specifically about scorpions. And would you call this more your focus?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like as the curator of arachnology, I really try to be an equal opportunist when I give talks often. But at the bottom of my heart, I am a scorpion biologist, and so talking about scorpions is pretty much my favorite thing.
And I know that I know generally I think last time you told us the story generally of how you got interested, but was there an immediate fascination when you saw your first scorpion?
I mean, I think everybody, I guess, my sense is that almost pretty much no one doesn't have, that seems like, that was a lot of negatives. I think pretty much everyone has some immediate, feeling when they see a scorpion, whether that's excitement or fear or, intrigue. It invokes something out of just about everyone. Because it's this creature, it's super, in movies and TV and stuff, it's portrayed as kind of the villain. It's associated with foreshadowing of a bad event,
right?
Or a bad person arriving into town, or something bad. So I don't know if it's necessarily just coming from TV and movies that we have this fear or fascination with scorpions. I think it's also something kind of innate about them. They're dangerous, they have a stinger, and we're ingrained to be scared of things that could cause us pain, and so when I saw my first scorpion, I was a kid, and I remember there was an electrical manhole cover, I don't even know, it was made the gas or the electrical lines or something that I shouldn't have been opening in the first place, but I would open that little manhole cover up and there would be scorpions in there, and it was one of my favorite things to do. And I wouldn't ever touch them or anything. I would just be oh, and I'd put it back really quick because I was pretty sure they were gonna leap out and attack me.
But then you'd go right back there and do it again.
And then I'd bring my friends the next day and show them.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right though. It's I think humans are funny in that anything that looks dangerous, we immediately assume it wants to get us, personally, that thing's coming for me. But and I think you're right that it evokes something in everybody immediately, but it does not evoke the desire to devote your life to scorpions. So still think you're kind of an outlier there.
True. And I guess I never really had the intent of devoting my life to scorpions when I was in college and going to school, and then decided that at some point I was yeah, that sounds just about as good as anything else.
Yeah. Or better. Yeah. Well, can you take us through what you're going to cover today?
Yeah. So today I'm just going to introduce everyone to scorpions, what they are, what they do, where they live, all the basics. And then I'm going to talk about, I don't know if it's my top 10. I get this question all the time, what's your favorite scorpion? And I don't really have a favorite, is the reality. I think pretty much all of them are cool when you dig deep into what they do and where they are and how they got there in terms of their evolutionary past. But if I had to pick a top 10, I picked randomly from the top 700 that I like. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to be your top 10.
Okay. I mean, that's an excellent caveat. I think we're ready for that. And viewers, I'll get out of here while Lauren does her intro, but then I'm going to pop back in when she's doing her definitive top 10 in the world ever scorpions, no question. So feel free to ask your questions live as she's talking, and we'll kind of work those in throughout the prezo instead of waiting until the end. If you're on Facebook, leave them in the comments. If you're on YouTube, leave them in the chat. And all right, I will give you your slides, Lauren. Right. And get out of here for the moment. See you in a bit.
Okay, so Scorpion 101. I was thinking to myself yesterday as I was starting to prepare this presentation, what are the things that people need to know about scorpions in order to begin to understand these horribly maligned creatures? And So I thought a little bit about their basic biology and explaining some of the really like essentials, like foundational, what do scorpions do and what do they look like. But the reality is we don't know very much about their basic biology. I mean, we know sort of collectively as a group basic things like where their heart is and how they breathe. But for any individual species, we know very little about what it does. We don't really know about what it eats. We don't really know like specifically what habitat requirements it needs in order to survive. We can really just at this point make generalizations about scorpions and what scorpions do. So I'm going to talk to you about those generalizations, and then we'll get into a little bit more detail about these top 10, and hopefully you learn something new. So let me see here. So first, some super basic. Scorpiology is the study of scorpions. You can ology pretty much anything, but I am certainly consider myself a scorpiologist. That is a scientist who studies scorpions. In addition to being an arachnologist, which is somebody who studies arachnids, which scorpions are. So we know that scorpions are arachnids for a few reasons, but in general, if you want to know if something's an arachnid and you're on land, you can be pretty certain that if it has a hard exoskeleton or like a shell around its body, like a shrimp or a lobster, this exoskeleton, and it has 4 pairs of walking legs and 2 major body parts, then it's probably an arachnid. You are probably most familiar with arachnids like spiders, but I'll talk to you a little bit more about all the things that make scorpions arachnids. So first, there's a lot of different scorpions. And I found this really awesome poster by somebody named Julian Camzall. And it really, I think, kind of highlights the diversity of scorpions. But what you can see in this is that they all really have this same basic body architecture. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But the one thing that you probably can't see in here is that there's sort of 2 major body forms in scorpions. There's scorpions with big claws and a relatively small tail compared to the overall size of their claws. And there's scorpions with either a very wide, robust, muscly tail or a very long, extremely skinny tail and really small claws up in front. And so when I talk about this, what I'm talking about are these claws up in front right here and this tail down in the back over here, if you follow my pointer. Today, there's about 2,400 species of scorpions that have been discovered by scientists so far. And that really represents an order of magnitude in increase in knowledge from 100 years ago. Only 100 years ago, there were only about 240 species that had been discovered by science. And in the last 100 years, we've been in the midst of like a scorpion knowledge revolution. We've discovered so many new species. There's dozens of new species discovered still every year. It's, I think, a really exciting time to be a scorpion biologist because as we document more and more new species of scorpions, we're better understanding what scorpions do and what their role is really on Earth in their ecosystems. As a lineage, scorpions on land are about 430 million years old. They've been doing the same thing that they do today on land, being predators, for the last 430 million years without really changing anything about their basic body architecture. They still look generally the same as fossil scorpions from 430 million years ago, with a few differences that I'll point out in just a minute. So, as I mentioned before, scorpions have 8 legs. Those legs are divided on either side of the body in 4 and 4. They use all those legs for walking. Sometimes the first pair of legs can be kind of hidden underneath the pedipalps or claws. So they're oftentimes hard to see, but I guarantee that they're under there. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, and then this 4th one's right over here. They have these at the bottom of each of their legs. Their legs are tipped in tarsal claws. And these tarsal claws are really cool because they allow them to hang on to like the surface that they're walking on. It's a really great grip. It allows them to walk vertically up the trunk of trees. It allows them to hang on to rock surfaces and even rock faces. And they also have all these hairs. Sometimes the hairs can be really dense. And those hairs often help them dig in sand. So some scorpions live in burrows that they construct themselves, and those burrows can be in all sorts of types of all different types of soil, including sand. And those long brushes of hairs in some species are really important for scooping out whatever substrate it is when they're constructing those burrows. So sometimes you'll see really, really long hairs. They also help them increase the overall surface area to get a better grip on the things that they're walking on. So the hairs kind of like act almost as an adhesive, so sort of helping the grip. Like if you imagine the difference between like the tread on hiking boots, which have a lot of surface sculpturing, versus like Converse, which have almost none. It's much easier to hike in hiking boots because of the tread on the bottom than it is in Converse. And that's the same as the hairs on the bottom of scorpion feet. What's I think most obvious to people about scorpions is that they have two claws up in front. Those claws are called pedipalps. And it's the same structure that's used for reproduction in spiders. In spiders, it's known as the palps, and it's in male spiders, these two little kind of boxing glove looking structures that they use for transferring sperm. But in scorpions, it's modified into these claws. The exact same structures evolves in a really different trajectory, and they use those claws for grasping prey. So oftentimes you'll see scorpions participating in this behavior that's called gatekeeping, where they just sit at the entrance of the burrow or the crevice that they're living in, and they stick their face out. Their face is right over here up front, and their two little claws out with their fingers open in their claws, just waiting for something to walk by. Their claws are covered in all of these very sensitive sensory hairs, and the sensory hairs are almost like whiskers. So they're a hair that's stuck down into a socket, so it moves all around. It's very movable. And that socket at the bottom of the hair, inside of the socket, is a nerve that's connected to the sensory hair that allows them to feel subtle vibrations. In some cases, they can pick up chemical sense, so chemosensory, sort of like smell. And they're in other cases serving as sort of a trigger for closing their claws. So letting them know through this sensory whether something's inside of their claws or not, so that they can close down these really hard exoskeleton rimmed and muscular claws. At the end of their body, they have this long tail that ends in a stinger, and so the stinger is right here. This whole structure right here we call the sting. And the sting is, I guess, really kind of the business end of a scorpion. That's where their venom is contained. All scorpions have. This is a CT scan of a scorpion stinger, and what you can see in this is that there's two paired glands. That's what's in blue right here. You can see it from the side view right here. And there's two paired glands in the stinger of every scorpion, and those glands contain all of those glands are responsible for producing all of the neuropeptides and other components of the cocktail that scorpions produce in their venom. The gland is surrounded by muscular tissue, which is what you see in green right there. And that muscular tissue is responsible for squeezing the glands and ejecting the venom out through this sort of hypodermic needle that they have going through the tip of their stinger or the barb of their stinger. You can see a really close-up magnification view of the tip of the stinger. There's the sort of an opening right here, and you can see it's really kind of like a hypodermic needle, like a syringe if you were to get a vaccination. That's the same thing as a scorpion. They have a gland inside. It pushes the liquid out through the sting. All scorpions have venom, and all scorpions are venomous. They inject their venom into animals, typically into prey. That's the primary thing that they want to use their venom for. They want to capture their prey. They want to keep their prey from walking away. They want to start to pre-digest their prey before they begin to mechanically break it up with their mouth parts. And so, super importantly, they have this venom that allows them to incapacitate prey. What scorpions less often use their venom for is defending themselves from predators. And that's something that I think people often ask about. Are scorpions dangerous to humans? Well, the answer is it really depends on the scorpion. All scorpions can sting you, just like all animals can bite you. They can sting you, they can pinch you with their claws, but whether or not that sting is harmful to you really depends on what kind of scorpion you've been stung by. If we think about those scorpions I told you before that have big claws and that have small claws, so the ones with the big claws and the relatively skinny tail, those scorpions are mostly using these really strong, super muscular claws for defending themselves. And that's like this scorpion here. It's got big claws, it's got a relatively small tail. And it's mostly using those claws for capturing prey and for defending itself. And it may be using the sting primarily as a last defense or to inject predigestive enzymes that help it break down its food. If conversely, we're talking about scorpions that have skinny claws and really robust tails, like long, skinny, or super fat. Oftentimes those scorpions contain neurotoxins that affect mammal nervous systems. And what that means is they go in and they interact with the way that your nerves talk to one another. So, for example, if you put your hand down on a stove, your nerves in your hand are going to sense pain and tell your brain by sending a signal that transmits from one nerve cell to another, to another, to another, all the way up to your brain, that you need to remove your hand from the stove because it hurts. Something bad is happening to your hand. And so you take your hand away. That's a neurological response. Scorpion venom, at least the neurotoxic kind of scorpion venom that affects humans, does the same thing. It goes in, it sends a signal, a scorpion stings you. It's a tiny little prick, like getting poked by a thumbtack, and it starts sending a signal up to your brain. It hijacks the way your nerves talk to each other, and it tells your nerves, okay, send a signal to the brain that says, my hand's on a stove, when all that really happened was you got pricked by a thumbtack. And so that signal slowly moves up your arm, into your brain. Your brain says, oh my God, my hand's on fire. I need to remove it from whatever circumstance it's in immediately. You take your hand away from the scorpion that thought that it was trying to save its life by stinging you because you're this huge giant that just tried to pick it up. And the scorpion has a chance to run away because you've taken your hand off of it. So the scorpion is really hijacking our nervous system to escape from predators. And so in those scorpions where they have venom that can affect the human nervous system, there is some danger to humans. But luckily, that's only about 1% of all scorpions that really pose any severe danger. There's another probably 50% of scorpions that cause enough of a pain signal that makes you react instantaneously. It feels very, very painful, and that pain may last for a couple of hours. But for the large majority, it feels almost like a thumb prick. I mean, almost like a prick from a thumbtack, and nothing would ever happen to you. Okay, back to some basic scorpion anatomy. So scorpions are divided into two major body parts, the prosoma, which is the head, and the opistosoma, which is the body. And that's one of the things that tells us it's an arachnid. So in addition to having 8 legs, like all other arachnids, scorpions have 2 major body parts. In scorpions, it's a little hard to tell. The head is all one unit, right here at the front. And then the opistosoma is divided up into multiple segments. There's several segments in the body and then several segments in the tail, ending in the sting. In spiders, the division between the head and the body into 2 parts is a lot clearer. So here's a spider. This is a golden silk orb weaver, and it really has 2 very clear parts of its body. It has the opistosoma, which is separated from the prosoma by sort of a waist or a very narrow section of the body that connects the 2 major body parts. So in spiders, we see very clearly that there's 2 body parts, as opposed to insects, which have 3 main body parts. They have the head, the abdomen, and the thorax. The head, yeah, whatever. I can't remember which order they come in insects for some reason. That's my brain at 10 a.m. Okay, so back to scorpions. So all scorpions have 3 sets of eyes, and those 3 sets of eyes are divided into 2 groups. There's the major eyes, which are up right in the center of the head. Oftentimes they're sort of lifted up in little turrets that help them see outward, so that they have sort of binocular or 3D vision on looking out onto the horizon. And then oftentimes they have, well, always, they have these minor sets of eyes up here in the front in the 2 corners of their head. And usually those are a set of 3 to 6 eyes, most often 3 major eyes and 1 to 3 minor eyes. And the eyes are pretty cool. They look kind of like this. This is a very awesome picture of a scorpion eye. This is one of the major eyes right in the center of the head, and you can see it kind of has like an iris in the middle. They don't have the best vision. They have simple eyes, although they respond very well to shadows of light and dark. So scorpions are able to perceive you walking by just by the shadow that you cast and the size of that shadow. Their eyes are not used for vision that much, in part because they're nocturnal, and so they don't need a ton of vision acuity, but they have all sorts of other sensory structures that they use for sensing their environment. So I just wanted to run through what the underside of a scorpion looks like really quick. So here we have the top side of a scorpion. This is what the scorpion would look like when you look at it. But if you were to flip it over, it would look like this. So this is just that same scorpion flipped over. And what I wanted to point out here is that they have this structure right here in the middle of their body. These are called pectins. Wow, I almost forgot that word. These are called pectins. They're a sensory organ that the scorpion uses, and that they use it. It's actually like covered in all these sensory structures things called peg-sensilla, and also a bunch of hairs, and all of those structures. This structure is completely innervated. It's covered in nerves. It has tons and tons of innervation. So we know that it's for sensory. And those peg-sensilla, there's different peg-sensilla that have different functions. Some of them are mechanoreceptors, so they're actually feeling vibration. And again, this structure is on the underside of the scorpion. So as the scorpion's walking, this is a flexible structure. It's got muscles attached to it, so they can move it up and down. And they'll move it down to the ground, put it in contact with the ground, and those peg-sensilla will pick up tiny, tiny vibrations that are coming from the surface of the ground. It also has chemosensory structures, so it can smell and kind of taste. So it's kind of like an all-in-one sensory structure that they can put in contact with the ground to smell for pheromones of other organisms, smell for pheromones for potential mates, feel things walking by. And in some species, these peg-sensilla are so sensitive to mechanoreception, to the vibrations, that they can feel an insect approaching from several meters away. They'll start to orient themselves towards the insect, and in some cases chase after it. So they're really, really sensitive structures, great for helping them hunt and also telling them when it's time to hide because a predator may be coming. The other thing that's on the bottom of their body that's not super clear in this picture is the opening to their book lungs. So scorpions respire using passive respiration. They have these sort of pockets underneath on the bottom side of their body, and inside of each pocket is a book lung. And basically what that is it's an internalized gill. So if you imagine a gill, like a fish gill, when they breathe, they kind of open the sides of their head, those opercula that they have that allows them to pass water over their gills. If you imagine if you just squished that up and pushed all those gills together and then stuck it inside your body, it would be a great way to move from being an aquatic organism to being a terrestrial organism, because now that gill is enclosed, it's protected to reduce the amount of evaporation that occurs from your body out into the open. And it still has a lot of surface area because each of those pages of the book have a whole surface on one side and a whole surface on the other side that can absorb oxygen. So it maximizes oxygen absorption while minimizing water loss. So these book lungs are a really great adaptation. That happened when scorpions first came out of the ocean, which I'll talk about in just a second, onto the land and became terrestrial. Okay. Oh, and the last thing that they have on the bottom of their body that's really important is they have their genital operculum. And so this is the opening to their reproductive system, both for males and females. It's the same opening. And I should mention that scorpions also exude waste. So when after they eat, they exude waste like mostly anything else. I say mostly because not all things exude waste. There's actually some mites that have been hypothesized to never poop. But scorpions do poop, and they poop out of the end of their tail right here. So in order for a scorpion's waste to get out of its body, it has to pass through its digestive system, which is right here in its opistosoma, or the main part of its body, and then it goes all the way down a channel, all the way through their tail, out to the end, and comes out at the end of their tail, right before their sting. There's one species of scorpion, which I didn't include in my top 10, so I'm just going to mention it now, which is capable of autotomizing its tail to escape predators. So like if you've ever seen a video or maybe in real life, a lizard that cuts its tail off to try to get away from predators, and its tail kind of flops around and the lizard runs away. So this species of scorpion is able to do the same thing, and they autotomize their tail. Their tail kind of twitches around, and the scorpion runs away. But the kind of crazy thing about that is that when these scorpions autotomize their tail, they're also autotomizing their anus, and so they can never poop again for the rest of their lives. So they're able to keep living, but probably not for super long before they can't handle their waste production anymore. Okay, so back in the day, scorpions were marine organisms, and they were also much larger than they are today. So this is a species called Brontoscorpio. It was quite large. You can see a rendering up in the top left over here of a human being standing next to a brontoscorpion. Can you imagine taking that thing for a walk? They were predators. They were marine predators. And it's been hypothesized that Brontoscorpio, or something similar to Brontoscorpio, was the first terrestrial predators to come the first predators to come out of the water and out onto land. So scorpions were, or at least scorpion ancestors, were the first terrestrial arthropods, and probably the first really large terrestrial predators to come on land that weren't like a worm or some other a non-exoskeletoned invertebrate. And you can see that they look really pretty similar to scorpions today. They have a tail. The tail ends in a sting. They have these claws up in front, and they have chelicerae, which are the chewing mouth parts that also all arachnids have, these chewing mouth parts. In some groups like spiders, these mouth parts have been modified into fangs, but in most other chelicerates, they're these little chewing, look like tiny mini little claws. But Brontoscorpio was, even though it was a pretty big species and was the most similar to modern day scorpions, it wasn't the largest of its kind. And it belonged to a group of scorpions called oh my gosh, I have apparently lost half my vocabulary this morning. It belonged to a group of scorpions that lived in the ocean. That was really the ancestor of modern day scorpions. And here's a artist rendering of Brontoscorpio. He's taken a walk through the ocean floor chasing after this fish. They were eating all sorts of things, including early vertebrates like fish. And as he's walking around, he suddenly gets ambushed. And we'll see this ambush attack in just a second. And he's ambushed by another species of sea scorpion that is related, but way, way, way bigger. This is Pterygotis. And Pterygotis was the largest of the Eurypterids or sea scorpions. It was several meters long. And I can't even imagine encountering this thing. It was literally the size of a crocodile, as you just saw the text say in the bottom of this video. And they were kind of like the grizzlies of the ocean. They were really top predators. They were eating everything. They were ambush predators. And we know that they were eating other species of Eurypterids based on fossilized gut contents that we've been able to recover in some of the fossils. Nowadays, scorpions live pretty much everywhere on land. There are no marine living scorpions anymore. Those ancestors are gone. They've died off. They really reached the peak of their heyday in the Silurian era. And then it's been hypothesized that scorpions began to terrestrialize because first there was opportunity. There were no other big predators on land. So they were able to come out onto land and take advantage of the prey items that had terrestrialized before them, had come out onto land before them. And the other thing is that they were starting to face competition from bony fishes that at that time were getting really, really large and were capable predators that had strong enough jaws to break apart the really strong exoskeleton of scorpions, or sea scorpions anyways. But they came out onto land and they've been very successful. I think most often when we think about scorpions, we think about a desert scene, a scorpion walking by. But the reality is they basically live everywhere that doesn't freeze for really long periods of the year. So we don't find them in most of North Europe or Asia, or as well as most of Canada. But they're found throughout a large majority of the Americas, all of Africa, all of Australia, and most of Central Asia and Southern Europe. There's a couple exceptions. They're found pretty much on every island worldwide, with the exception of Hawaii. Hawaii has no native scorpions, and neither does New Zealand. New Zealand being absent of a lot of animals because it is a very weird island archipelago, and it's thought that it went underwater for periods of history, and I think the scorpions, they just simply didn't make it. So needless to say, I don't ever do research in New Zealand or Hawaii because there are no scorpions there. But the rest of the world, I spend a lot of time in trying to document the species of scorpions that we share this earth with. So scorpions are nocturnal, which means a lot of my research is done at night. There are a few species, there's always exceptions to everything in biology, as I learned as an undergraduate. And one of those exceptions is scorpions being nocturnal. There are some scorpions that are diurnal. And in fact, the few species of scorpions that are diurnal that live in places where humans live are some of the most hazardous scorpions to humans, because there's more opportunity for them to interact with humans. So there's a species in Brazil that is often diurnal, and there's a species in southern Africa that's often diurnal, that both of them are relatively problematic for human populations because of envenomation. But scorpions don't eat humans, nor do they eat typically any other species of mammals or vertebrates for that matter. Although they are opportunistic, so they'll eat just about anything they can get their hands on and overpower. So occasionally they'll eat very small vertebrates like little geckos or little frogs, but more often they're eating nocturnal insects or each other. They're also like very cannibalistic, and scorpions will readily eat any other scorpions. But often they're eating things like crickets or moths or nocturnal beetles or other things that are insects and out and about at night. That's their primary prey. They have some really cool adaptations that help them navigate in the dark. One of those is triangulation. And so scorpions have this ability to triangulate using celestial navigation. And so if you don't know what triangulation is, I'm just going to run you through the basis of triangulation from the human perspective. So if you have a cell phone or a GPS, the way that the GPS or the cell phone figures out where you are is that it connects to at least 3 satellites or cell phone towers, and it figures that you must be in the center of those. So GPS and cell phone localization knows where the location of the towers or the satellites, and so then it calculates you as being in the center. And the more towers or satellites that you connect to, the better your localization. It's more able to pinpoint your location because it figures that you must be in the middle of every single one. If you're only on 1 or 2 satellites, that's when your Google Maps gets super wonky because your phone just can't figure out where you are. It knows that you're in the middle of these 2, but it doesn't know whether you're on the side of either of them. And scorpions have been hypothesized to do the same thing, particularly scorpions that live in featureless environments like sand dunes. When scorpions dig their burrows are really metabolically costly for them to construct, especially in sand dune systems. And what that means is that it takes a lot of energy to dig these really deep burrows. And oftentimes, because sand dunes are in hot desert ecosystems, the burrows have to be very deep for the scorpions to be far enough from the surface of the sand dune for the temperature and humidity to change. And they want to stay cool and they want to stay relatively humid compared to the scorching hot surface of the sand dunes. So it takes them a lot of energy to construct these burrows. Also, over time, many scorpions that construct burrows have evolved behaviors that help them avoid predation. So there's things that are out looking for scorpion burrows because scorpions are a really nutrient-rich snack. And so there's all sorts of things that eat scorpions. And so scorpions have evolved these behavioral adaptations where they now construct burrows that are like spirals. They go like a meter deep in the sand. They have false entrances. false chambers, all to try to confuse and evade getting eaten because they're down there like very vulnerable in their burrow. And so the energy it takes to construct these is so great that if they leave the burrow to forage for prey or to try to find mates, it's really, really critical that they are able to find that burrow again. And so scorpions that are nocturnal, most scorpions, tend to have their activity linked to the lunar cycle, meaning that they come out and are active on the surface of the environment, mostly when the night is moonless, so when there's no moon and the stars are very, very visible. No moon means first that you aren't seen as easily, because when the moon's out it can be very bright and it makes your predators have a much easier time finding you through vision. And secondly, it makes the stars more visible. And so scorpions that live in sand dune systems oftentimes have been hypothesized to use triangulation as navigation, and some of the evidence for that relates to the shape of the triangle between their three sets of eyes. And we know that in sand dune living scorpions, the triangle is more equilateral, and so that should help with their ability to triangulate, gazing up into the night sky and calculating their position relative to the position of the stars and to the position of their burrow. Okay, so scorpions have some other really, really cool behaviors that have helped them survive for 430 million years on land. The first is in that last picture of the scorpion triangulating, and in this video, this is actually not an adaptation, so I don't know why I introduced it as such, but it's a feature that's common to all scorpions, which is that they fluoresce under ultraviolet light. So here in this picture, you can see the scorpion glowing kind of a green color, and here in this preview of the video, as soon as it pops up, you'll see that there's scorpions kind of like a darker blue color. And what this is it's ultraviolet light that's being shown on the scorpions, and it fluoresces. All scorpions fluoresce under ultraviolet light. We don't really know why. We don't know what the function is precisely. It's been hypothesized to be a sensory system for sensing light. It's been hypothesized to be sort of an anti-predation warning coloration for scorpions that are active at night. And it's been hypothesized to be sort of like perhaps like a lure for luring prey in, because oftentimes flowers also have a UV patterning. Although I would say like the counter argument to the flowers is that at the time scorpions were terrestrializing and coming up onto Earth and evolving out from their common ancestor that also likely fluoresce under ultraviolet light, there were no flowering plants yet. So it's probably unlikely that they're mimicking flowers. But we do know that all scorpions do this. They all have this ability. And essentially what fluorescence is it is a pigment embedded in their exoskeleton that absorbs light and then bounces that light back at a higher wavelength than the light that it absorbed. So they all have this kind of green or blue hue, which makes it really easy to find them in a moonless night with an ultraviolet light. Okay, so I'm going to play this video. It's a video of a scorpion courtship. Here's this male emperor scorpion fluorescing under ultraviolet light. He approaches a female scorpion and he grasps her hands. He is on this side and she is on this side. These scorpions are pretty evenly matched in terms of their overall size. Typically, the female scorpions are much larger in mass, in total body size. And so it's risky for the male to run up to the female because she can, at a minimum, do him some serious damage by stinging him or crushing body parts with her really strong claws. And at a maximum, she'll eat him. But if he's able to grasp her claws, then he begins what we call a pas de deux, or a courtship dance. And the dance starts with just sort of a back and forth swaying where he guides her, grasping her hands with his hands. At some point, they begin to do this other behavior that's called a collateral massage. And that's where he's kind of massaging or grasping onto her mouth parts with his mouth parts. And that's another pretty typical part of the courtship dance. The courtship dance varies from species to species. So while they all have like the same kind of general steps where the male grasps the female's hands and leads her back and forth, and oftentimes does closer massage. Sometimes there's other elements that are added in, like leg juddering, where they like sort of shudder their legs back and forth very rapidly, or something called a sexual sting, which is where the male stings the female in a very typified part of her body, always on the side, right behind the head, which doesn't seem to affect her in any way. They're probably injecting some sort of hormone, pheromones that help her with species recognition. If the female thinks that the male did the dance well, eventually if the female doesn't run away, like she can escape at any given moment. If she doesn't run away, it seems like a strong indication that he's done the dance well. He's a good ballroom dancer. He'll deposit on the ground a gelatinous stalk that's tipped with a sperm packet called a hemispermatophore, and he'll guide her towards the hemispermatophore, and she will uptake the sperm packet with her genital operculum if she thinks the dance went well. If she doesn't, then she'll just leave it alone. She'll leave. In some cases she'll eat it because it's a little protein-rich structure that she can derive some nutrients from. After that, the sperm goes into a specialized sperm storage structure in her reproductive system, and she saves it. She doesn't fertilize her embryos immediately. She actually saves that sperm for when the conditions are right, and so sometimes the sperm can be stored for several years, waiting for just the right conditions in the environment before the female decides to impregnate herself. That's another really cool feature of scorpions, is that they don't lay eggs, they give live birth. So they give birth to live young. The babies come out of their reproductive system from their ovareuterine system and look just like little tiny baby scorpions. They're actually called scorpionlings. And then she exhibits a parental care by caring for the scorpions for some period of time. So I've got a video of a scorpion birth for you, and you can see that the exact process. So this is a video that's being shot from there's a scorpion that's sitting on a glass, and the person that created the video shot the video up through the glass, so we're actually looking at the bottom of her stomach and can see this birth in action. So you can see, like, in her belly, you may be able to see that there's some like little eyes right here, and those are like scorpionling eyes that are still inside of her belly. Here's her genital operculum right here. And you can see that it's just above these pectin structures that I mentioned before, those sensory structures. And here comes this little scorpion out of the birth canal. There it is. And it's kind of in an amniotic sac at this point, and in a little while it will break that amniotic sac, and it will climb up the arms of the mother scorpion. The mother scorpion forms what's called a birth basket, where she kind of arches her back up, and puts her claws into a basket with her first pair of walking legs. And the scorpionlings, as they break the amniotic sac, will climb up onto her back. And then that looks like this here. And this is a mother scorpion with scorpionlings on her back. And she'll continue to care for those scorpionlings for some period of time until they've had their first molt. Every time a scorpion grows, it has to molt its entire exoskeleton, which includes the external openings of its respiratory system, so its book lungs, as well as its entire digestive system. It has to molt all of that in one go and then reharden an exoskeleton. And it's during this period of time the scorpion's very, very at very high risk to being predated upon, because it now doesn't have this strong exoskeleton to protect it. It also, because its exoskeleton isn't hardened, its muscles are unable to really retract its appendages very well, so it can't move particularly well. And so these little scorpionlings will stay up on their mom's back. They're very fat off of amniotic fluid, and they don't need to eat for the first instar, the first period of life, until they molt their exoskeleton. They go through this really high-risk period for the very first time, and when that exoskeleton rehardens, they'll start moving off the mom's back and out into the wild. Okay, so I hope at this point you have slightly fallen in love with scorpions, or at least are intrigued about their biology, because now I'm going to talk to you about my top 10 epic scorpion list. And I hope by the end of it, you'll like them even a little bit more.
That was incredible. And I can say for sure that you are creating scorpion fans left and right. People, yeah, there's lots of comments about having their minds blown. And we have so many questions already. I was going to just ask you two quickly and then save a lot of them for the end, just because I know that people really do want to see that top 10. But one of the things that surprised so many people was just the 430 million years. And so a lot of people ask this question, a version of the question I'm going to read from Rebecca. And she asks, what are some of the theories about why there has been so little change other than size since prehistoric times?
I mean, I think that probably the main thing is that they are just really successful. So if something's not broken, you don't need to fix it, really. But the small amount of change is really pertaining to like the gross external morphology. Like they're still like fundamentally the same shape and body form. But in terms of like other changes that have occurred, there's been tons of adaptation. I mean, scorpions have adapted to every ecosystem on Earth, and they're continuing to adapt as like historic climate change has occurred. So there's constant adaptation in scorpions, and I'm going to talk actually, my number one species pick is actually an adaptation story that's happening right now. Because they have this venom cocktail that's made up of lots of components, there's all sorts of opportunities for adaptation to occur that really like fine tunes each of the molecules that make up that cocktail. And so while their basic architecture hasn't changed, there's tons of evolution happening all the time in scorpions.
Okay, great. We do have some venom questions, but I'm going to save those to the end because I suspect you'll cover a lot of them. So I'll ask this other one from D Squared, who asked a lot of really good questions. Many people wanted to know, are the similarities between scorpions and lobsters just due to converging evolution, or do they share a common ancestor?
So they do share a common ancestor. It's a super deep common ancestor. So they're both arthropods, which means that they have exoskeletons and jointed appendages. And the reason that they look so similar is because they both have maintained what we call a plesiomorphic state, or an ancestral state. So they look really similar to like the first arthropod. When the first arthropod was just like a multi-segmented thing that probably looked kind of like a lobster. I think the reason that they probably look the most similar really is because they have claws and they're kind of like elongate in body shape. But the reality is that scorpions are more closely related to ticks and spiders and even horseshoe crabs, which are arachnids, than they are to lobsters. Lobsters are more closely related to insects. And in fact, insects are just kind of a derived lineage of crustaceans, which are what lobsters are. So lobsters are more like the cockroaches of the sea than they are the scorpions of the sea.
Right. Okay, excellent. And we did actually have several people asked, do we know whether those ancient marine scorpions, did they also have venom and actually sting things?
We don't know. And in fact, the final appendage really varies from species to species, fossil species to species. So some of them have what really looks like a clear kind of bulb and a sting like Brontoscorpio. Whereas others, it looks more like kind of a paddle, or it's just like ends in kind of like a straight like spike for impaling something. So it may have started out as kind of like a swimming appendage, and then slowly through time. And the reality is like these eurypterids, these sea scorpions, they went through like an explosion where there was many species that all appeared in the fossil record really kind of all at once. So they had this like heyday where they were in the Silurian period, where they were just like, they were like dominant in the oceans. There was like lots of species, there was lots of individuals, they were all eating each other, and they all had like these slightly modified differences in what their tail looked like. And then we get to Brontoscorpio, where Brontoscorpio is now smaller in size than some of the other species, and it has this really clear bulb before the sting that like we're pretty sure had venom in it, or at least it had something in it, maybe just digestive enzymes that it was injecting into prey.
That's wild. Okay, well, we have lots more, and every time you say something, we get more, but I'm going to save a bunch of them and let you dive into that top 10. So if you asked a question that didn't get answered, we're probably going to completely, totally, almost certainly get to it. Just keep them coming in and we'll pepper them in and then ask the bulk at the end. So yeah, thank you. Let's see what you got.
All right. So number 1 is the Arizona bark scorpion, Centauroides sculpturatus, and I wanted to highlight this one because I am an expert on Centauroides. That's like the group of scorpions that I I hope my colleagues think I'm an expert on. And this one, I would be remiss, like being in the United States, without talking about this, because this is like the only venomous scorpion of any concern in the United States. It's not dangerous to adult humans, but it is, at least it was dangerous to children. And there were a few deaths, not many, like it was just couple a year of primarily children up until the commercial antivenom began to become available widely. And now children can get treated with antivenom in hospitals, and it doesn't kill them. But the point is that this was a little tiny scorpion. Actually, I have a to scale thing here. And this little tiny scorpion is able to deliver a lethal sting to a child, which is like a pretty big child. Like children are like 50 pounds or something. But the question is, why is its venom so toxic? Because it doesn't eat children. It certainly doesn't eat any mammals. And here it is standing next to a southern grasshopper mouse, Onychomys torridis. I feel like torridis sounds like a really like kind of scary name. And this mouse it's small. It's like a little tiny, it looks like kind of like a house mouse. It's a small little mouse. And so you can see these scorpions are also really small. And the fact that it could deliver a lethal dose of venom to a human child is like funny. It's perplexing. Like, why does it need such strong venom? That doesn't make any sense. It's not eating this stuff. And I should also add that the neurotoxins are really specific. So neurotoxins that act on mammals don't work on insects. And neurotoxins that act on insects, that interact with the insect nervous system, don't work on mammals. So they have these mammal neurotoxins, and it was perplexing for a while. And then a few years back, this really awesome researcher named Ashley Rao started doing some research on the southern grasshopper mouse. And the southern grasshopper mouse is sometimes called the southern scorpion mouse because it's a predator. Like this mouse might look kind of cute, but it is like a straight up predator. It eats meat, and the meat that it prefers to eat is scorpions. Also grasshoppers. I don't know. I mean, I think actually their preferred food is scorpions. Like when they've done diet studies on these little mice, like the primary thing that makes up its gut contents is scorpions. And so these scorpions and these mice live in the same place. And it turns out, and they live here in Arizona. This is me in Arizona looking for some Arizona bark scorpions for our new exhibit that we have at the Cal Academy called Venom. And as soon as we reopen, I really hope you'll come and see this super cool exhibit that has the Arizona bark scorpions and the southern grasshopper mouse side by side as predators and prey. And these mice, it turns out, can eat the scorpions with impunity. So here's a vicious, ferocious little mouse. You can see it just came up. Obviously it hurts when the scorpion stings it. It hurts. It starts digging in the sand. It jumps up. It leaps away, but it doesn't care. And it comes back for more. This time it's a little more careful. And it grabs the sting. It keeps getting like nailed in the face by this scorpion, and then just eats it. It just like rips its head off and starts eating it. And it turns out that these mice, as Dr. Rao figured out, that these mice have developed a resistance to the scorpion venom, and it's this really unique resistance where their nervous system actually hijacks the scorpion peptide and takes it and converts it into a painkiller. So there's these mice, and they get stung by the scorpion venom that's supposed to be really, really, really painful, and it is for just a second, and then all of a sudden their immune system takes over and it takes these peptides and it puts it into the channels where the nerves communicate, and it blocks the nerves from communicating the pain signal anymore. So it turns it into like ibuprofen for tiny mice, where now the scorpion stings it in the face and it like doesn't even feel it. So it can just eat scorpions all night long without feeling any pain. And so yeah, like these little mice are adorable, but also terrifying, and have probably contributed to increasing pain in the scorpion venom. And just in case you're not convinced about just how ferocious these mice are, I have this little video clip for you, because in addition to being predators, like carnivores, they are also territorial. And the way that they share their territory with the world is by howling at the moon. And so these little tiny scorpions and these little tiny mice have been in an evolutionary arms race, and it has resulted in a mouse developing a painkiller for its own body and a scorpion becoming increasingly toxic over time.
Lauren, I think you should probably play the mouse howl one more time.
Okay, that's a good point. Terrifying.
Thank you.
Truly terrifying. Okay, so are we ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is like I have a couple now of like just actually really bizarre scorpions. This is called the shield-tailed scorpion, and first, both the Arizona bark scorpion and the shield-tailed scorpion are in the family Buthidae, which is the only family of scorpions that contains where the scorpions make mammal-specific neuropeptides. So these are all the ones that are medically important to humans. Are pretty much basically all of them, with a couple of exceptions, are in the family Buthidae. But this next one is one that like we don't really know anything about. Like we basically don't know anything about what it does or like what it eats or what it's doing in its environment, but it's really bizarre. And the reason I like it is because it was described by a woman in 1932. And I will tell you, like, almost every species of scorpion was described by men. Like, men, hands down, dominated the scorpion field. There's pretty much no early scorpion biologists that were women. In spiders, there's a couple early spider biologists, but of arachnologists, certainly, like, it was male dominated. And I was like so excited when I realized that this one was described by this woman. Also because it's just so bizarre. It's called the shield-tailed scorpion because it has this modification to its tail that has like this big broad shield. It's usually just 2 segments, and it's like it's kind of not the best to tell in this picture, but it's like covered in spines. We don't know what they use it for or why they would need a shield in their tail. But we do know that they have one. It's found in the Middle East, so Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and it's a buthid, so it definitely contains neurotoxins that would affect the human nervous system. But there's not many records of it envenomating anyone, probably because it lives in like relatively remote areas that are not super populated. Oftentimes, scorpions, like you'd think that they don't care about the environment, but most of the time they're really sensitive to environmental change. So when environments get degraded through like human construction or resource extraction, the scorpions go locally extinct. So this one definitely falls into that category of like sensitive to human change, which is good for people not getting stung, but bad for scorpions continuing to thrive on Earth.
It's a really intimidating scorpion.
Yeah, it's pretty intimidating. And you remember earlier I talked about like the skinny hands? Like this one has really skinny hands. Like its fingers are so tiny, its hands are so tiny, but it's got this like long, skinny kind of like meaty tail.
Yeah. So we have gotten a series of questions. You referenced medical applications really briefly, but I'm going to read this one from Alexander. Are there any practical uses for scorpion venom, medical applications, etc.?
There's a lot of research for sure. Currently, there are no medical products derived from scorpion venom that have made it to market. But there's at least one that's really close, and they're being researched for a really wide variety of things. Everything from new forms of antibiotics, because there's some antimicrobial peptides in scorpion venom, to painkillers, to things that might help with loss of function in your neuromuscular system. So things like MS or Alzheimer's or arthritis, things where your neuromuscular system is running into issues. And the one that's made it the furthest down the pipeline of the process from going from model trials, which is like a model system like a mouse or rabbit, into human trials is a peptide that it's kind of like beautifully simple. It's this peptide that was discovered in a species of scorpion called the Israeli deathstalker scorpion, which sounds terrifying, and does in fact have venom that affects the human nervous system to a great extent. And it was discovered that there's one component of that venom cocktail that attacks or specifically binds to brain glioma cells, which is a type of cancer in your brain. And so some scientists have taken that peptide and attached to the peptide, and now, like, once you've identified a peptide, you can actually make it in the lab. You can get the DNA sequence and the amino acid sequence, and then you can just chemically manufacture it. the protein, and so they've attached through this process a fluorescent dye, and now when they inject this peptide into the body of something that has brain cancer, it goes out and seeks out just the cells that are cancerous, and it attaches this fluorescent dye to each of those cells, and tiny little tools and remove like all the cancerous cells and just leave all the healthy brain tissue. Whereas like the traditional way that you take out brain cancer, brain cancerous tumors from the brain is that you just cut them out, and you cut them until you are starting to cut into healthy cells, and that's how you know you got all of it. But in this way, they can just take out the only cancerous parts. So that's a pretty exciting development. I think it's in like phase 2 clinical trials, human clinical trials right now. So it's pretty close to being something that's available for doctors to use, neurosurgeons to use in the near future.
That's incredible. And also just the list of things you mentioned that it could potentially be useful for is just like a heavy hitting list.
Yeah, it's a heavy, and the reality is like we've only been able to document so far, like, I don't know, maybe 1% of the components of 1% of the scorpions. And we only have discovered maybe 50% of the scorpions so far. So there's like so much knowledge out there that we can learn. And that's exciting, I think. For me, who's like really excited about discovery and documentation of what lives on Earth, I'm excited about the prospects for human health once we've better documented what lives here.
Great, thank you so much. And you're really interested specifically in venom research too, right? Moving forward.
I am interested in venom research, specifically from the perspective of like what adaptation and evolutionary pressures have led to the diversification of venom, like how we have so much diversity of venom peptides today. And the way I see that kind of research linking in with human medical research is it really creates a roadmap. It creates a roadmap for people that are interested in particular cures or peptides that have particular functions to figure out which species they should go to in order to have a broader selection from which they can choose, looking for exactly the cure for the disease they're trying to solve.
Yeah. Okay. So if anyone out there is in a position to fund scientific research, please reach out. We have some amazing people here. Okay. Thank you. Let's see or please keep going.
Okay. We're only on number 3, so.
I know. I was trying to stay mindful of that.
We got lots of time still. Okay, so the next one is called the California swollen stinger scorpion. I was trying to think of something California since we're here in California, and this one is, I think, probably just the coolest looking scorpion from California. You can find it in throughout much of Southern California, and then there's also a close cousin that you can find in Nevada, Utah. That's just the swollen stinger scorpion. So it's Arachnids pococky. It's in the family Chactidae, so now we're in a different family of scorpions. These are burrowing scorpions, but what's weird about this scorpion is kind of like how that shield-tailed scorpion has that weird appendage with a shield, and we don't really know why. The California swollen stinger scorpion has a swollen stinger, and we have no idea why. This is a photo. You can kind of see it up here. It's not the most, I feel like it needs to be blown up to really appreciate it, but you can see just how fat this stinger looks. It just looks bizarrely huge, but then it also has this weird little bulb on the sting itself. And we don't know the function of it. These are non-buthids, so they don't have particularly gnarly neurotoxins. That's really just a shape thing. There's no structure inside that little bulb, so we don't know what function or role it's playing. And I'd like somebody to figure it out one day. So if you're inspired by this talk, I hope you become a scorpion scientist and figure out why they have a swollen stinger. And this photo is by a high school intern that's working with me named Prakrit Jain, and he has been photo documenting all of the species of scorpions that live in California, which is a hotspot for scorpions.
Excellent.
You ready for the next one?
We're ready.
Okay. So the next scorpion is a super cool one. It's from the family Typhlochactidae, and it's a cenote blind scorpion. It doesn't actually have a common name, so I just like made this one up as a descriptive name. They live in cenotes in Mexico, which are like deep cavernous caves created out of limestone when basically the limestone gets filled with water underneath the ground, the limestone rock, and the water slowly dissolves the limestone because oftentimes it's like slightly acidic and it dissolves the basic limestone, and then eventually the roof collapses out of the cavern, creating this like pocket, and these scorpions live in these pockets. This species lives a kilometer below the surface. So it is the lowest elevation scorpion on Earth, a kilometer below the surface of Earth. And it's completely blind. It's actually like depigmented, so it's cave adapted. And some of the features that are really are common with cave adapted species is they have elongated appendages. So you can see it's got these really, really long arms. Oftentimes they're covered in sensory structures. And this guy has like tons of little tiny hairs coming off his claws that he's using for sensory, and has no eyes whatsoever. Completely gone eyes. It's not even like oftentimes cave adapted creatures will kind of have like these vestigial eyes that are like the remnants of eyes, but they don't function anymore. This guy doesn't even have them anymore. They're just like gone. He doesn't need those structures, got rid of them. It also got rid of the pigment, like doesn't need that for any reason because it's not trying to blend into anything. Completely blind, never comes to the surface, almost a kilometer below the surface of the Earth, which is like mind-blowing. It's also mind-blowing that somebody found this in the first place. It was discovered in the 1970s by scientists. It may have been discovered long before that by other people.
Carol would like to know, so she's just observing basically that it looks more I think because there's no pigment, it looks kind of glass-like, but it's not actually more fragile structurally, is it, than a regular scorpion?
It's not more fragile necessarily, but it may have like thinner cuticle than other scorpions, just because it doesn't have any of the pressures of like digging into burrows or like crawling around like on the surface of the Earth, where like it might get like scratched and poked by sticks and stuff like that. It's just living in these like superhuman caves, and just kind of like hiding in little crevices and stuff.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, and just to be clear, is this list ordered? Like, are we building to your all-time favorite, or is it just a list of?
I really debated, and then in the end, I just made a list.
Okay.
I would say that they're all equally my favorite, which is why I couldn't like do a countdown.
Okay, that's fair. All right, excellent. Thank you.
So since I showed you the lowest elevation scorpion on Earth, I felt like it was only fitting for me to show you the highest elevation scorpion on Earth. And this one again, like doesn't have a common name. The scientific name is Orobothriurus huascaran, and this was a species discovered, I think, just like maybe 10 or 15 years ago, by some colleagues of mine in Argentina. It's from southern Peru, and it's the highest, like 100% documented species. It was clocked in at 4,910 meters in the Peruvian Andes, which is like high, like real high. Cold, super cold. Like I don't even want to go there to collect that scorpion. But this is what it looks like, and this is the place that it looks like. You can see it's like above the tree line. There's no trees. It's cold. It's snowy in the winter. And this little tiny scorpion's just living up there doing its thing. And in fact, there are scorpions in like pretty much all of the highest mountain ranges. There's scorpions in the Himalayas. There's scorpions in the Alps. There's scorpions here in California in the Sierra Nevadas. Like you pick a high mountain range, there's scorpions on it. They like are not scared of elevation and I think they're braver about the cold than I am. Are you ready for the next one?
We are ready. We're getting lots of so many good questions, but most of them are more general, so I'm gonna scoot them.
Save them.
Yeah.
And this one I should also mention is in the family Bothriuridae, and that's the same family of that scorpion that's has an autotomizing tail. And the researchers that study that are the same researchers that describe the species of scorpion, the same research group, and they have hypothesized that maybe that like tail autotomy is more widespread in this family than has been documented, and so there might be lots of scorpions not pooping because they lost their tail.
Oh, Alexander did want to know what the name of that scorpion
The name is Orobothrurus huascaran.
Oh no, the one that drops its tail. Sorry.
Oh, the one that drops its tail. It's in the genus Bothrurus, but I can't remember which species it was that was documented doing that.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one is like hands down the most commonly like observed on television scorpion. But what you probably don't know about it is, and it's in the family Scorpionidae, another family. This family is really typified by having like huge claws, and you've probably seen this on TV. It is like the scorpion on television or in movies. It's almost always portrayed as walking across a desert, but it is a tropical forest scorpion. It's called the emperor scorpion. Because it's the largest by mass species of scorpion in the world. There's some that are longer. This guy's the largest by mass. And in part that's because they have these like just massively huge claws that they use for like just crushing prey. Like they basically never use their tail. They don't sting. If you handle them, like getting stung is really, really rare. Apparently from the pet trade, I don't actually know. But they have these just like massive claws, so they just like pinch everything. And they live in these really complex burrow systems in tropical rainforests in Africa, in Central Africa. And what's cool about them is that they are one of the few species that's been observed living in multi-generational burrows. So there'll be like multiple generations of a family of scorpions living in a burrow all together, which is kind of unusual. Usually the scorpionlings like leave because the mom will eat them if they hang around too close. The other crazy thing about this scorpion is that it is one of only a handful of endangered species of scorpions, and that's because they have been so heavily harvested for the pet trade and are not typically captive bred. They're just harvested from the wild. And like, so if you've ever gone to a pet store and bought an emperor scorpion, chances are it came from the wild. The number one exporter of emperor scorpions in the world is the country of Togo, who has a standing license to export like I think 1 million individuals of emperor scorpions a year, which is crazy amount from a country as tiny as Togo, which is like, I think that's the tiniest country in Africa, is the smallest country in Africa. And they're most certainly not all coming from Togo. Like they're definitely coming from across the borders and just being exported through Togo. So part of the problem with captive breeding them is that they're super long-lived. They live like 25 years, and they don't reach sexual maturity until 4 or 5. And so like breeding them in captivity is just like takes a long time. And they don't have a ton, like their clutch size is pretty small, so they might only have like 20 babies at the most, whereas in other species it might range up to like 150, and they have babies like once or twice a year. In these guys it's like once a year, maybe once every couple years, not that many babies, takes 5 years to get to adulthood, and it's like the big adults that people want to buy in the pet store. And like they take them home and probably kill them almost instantly because they put them in a desert habitat and don't realize that they live in tropical jungles.
Right. So there aren't any real protections in place for them,
So they're listed on what's called the CITES list, or the red list, which is like the United Nations, the way that United Nations controls the trade of endangered species. So that red list is the same thing that like elephants and rhinos are listed on. And that does help curb the trade of wildlife for things that are big, but because it depends on like what level of CITES you're listed on. So there's like CITES Appendix 1, 2, and 3. 1 means like it can't ever cross international boundaries ever, and 3 means like you just need to, as a country, apply for a permit to the UN, and then you can trade them. And these guys are listed Appendix 3, and it's really because we're data deficient. So like the reality is there's probably way more scorpions that are endangered than just the 3 species that are commonly traded in the pet trade. But we don't have the data to show the UN to say like, hey, you need to list this other like 2,000 species. Because they're usually pretty range restricted, meaning like they're not found in a very wide area, and they're usually super sensitive to environmental change. So those are like some of the main factors in deciding whether something is at risk of extinction or not.
Right. Okay. I'm going to use this, since you mentioned lifespan, I'm going to use this as a chance to ask Angela's question too. She just wanted to know how long scorpions live. So what is the range?
So there are some species that are able to reach sexual maturity in just a year after birth. Typically, I would say like time to sexual maturity is a couple years, like maybe 2 or 3, and like lifespan is probably in the like 7 to 14 year range in the wild.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But
All right, let's keep going.
like we don't have any information, like we don't know.
Yeah, hopefully you're forging a bunch of new next-gen scorpion scientists with this program who can go out and help gather more data.
I hope so. Okay, so actually the next one is like a story about recent documentation of scorpions. So just in 1998, we found the most recent family of scorpions was discovered. That is the family Pseudocactidae. It was discovered by this guy named Alexander Gromov, who is from Kazakhstan, and he discovered in Uzbekistan. So this is like Central Asian desert, like these vast open deserts. And he discovered this new, like a whole new like a new family is unheard of. A new species is pretty common. Like I think most people think we've documented everything on Earth, but the reality is we find new species all the time. Like for most invertebrates, like tons and tons of new species that have yet to be discovered, or just like nobody's taken the time to document them. But for invertebrates, like even still we find new species of vertebrates like relatively regularly. But like a new family is like something unheard of. It's pretty crazy. This one was discovered in 1998. And since the discovery of the family, there's been like, I think like 8 species that have been discovered. And this is one of them. This is Pseudocactus mishi, named after somebody named Mishi. I can't remember their first name. And here it is. This is next to a mealworm. So if you've ever seen a mealworm, they're like teeny tiny, and this guy is teeny tiny. So like a little clue as to why it took so long to discover them, because most of them are either really small or really live in really deep caves in Southeast Asia. So they're like small in Central Asia, like in caves in Southeast Asia, just like nobody had found them. And the crazy thing about this family of scorpions is it's actually considered the basal most lineage of scorpions. So it's what we think is the earliest surviving branch of scorpions that branched off from the marine ancestor of scorpions. So this is like kind of like a living fossil in some ways.
It's also like undeniably adorable.
Can
cute, you? Right? Yeah, totally. Can you help people understand like what a family is, basically, like why that's such a big deal from a taxonomic perspective?
So a family, like a family is like a large grouping of organisms at like the coarsest level. So the level above family would be. I have to like do the thing in my head every time, like with the like.
You feel like a mnemonic.
You know that? Yeah, it's like a mnemonic. King Philip came over for good spaghetti. The level above family is order, and so the order of scorpions is like all scorpions. The order for like something comparable, like for us, our order is mammals. No, mammals is a class, I think. Yeah. Placental mammals is an order.
Okay.
So like,
okay.
So like,
it's getting complicated.
So, but it's like huge. Like it's basically everything that's not like kangaroos. Like all mammals. And so like like it's like if yesterday we woke up and discovered like all mammals exist.
Right.
Like,
right.
That's crazy. And so it's like it's a big deal. Or like nobody'd ever noticed that like snakes and lizards exist. Like it's
okay,
just,
that's helpful.
Or like turtles. Like nobody'd ever discovered like sea turtles before. Like you'd be like, whoa, what? Sea turtles? Like what is this thing?
Right.
And like we found that of scorpions in 1998.
Right. Yeah, amazing. So it's just like a really, really good indicator of just how much more there is left to find.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready.
Next up. We're getting close to I feel like we're getting close to the end, which makes me like wish I had a list of 20 and or ordered them, because I do like them all, but like maybe there was a best, I just didn't think enough about it.
I know.
Okay, so the next one is like very near and dear to my heart. It's a genus that I described from a group of scorpions called the club-tailed scorpions, and these are cool for a couple reasons. This is in the family Buthidae again. So again, like these are have venom that affects humans, and these guys are like big and robust. Like, I feel like when you think of like a dangerous scorpion, like this is what you think of in your head, like this big black scorpion that's dangerous. And this actually is a big black scorpion that's dangerous. And they're called club-tailed scorpions because they have this like kind of broad tail. In some species, the tail gets like starts narrower and like gets slightly bigger as it goes towards the end, towards the stinger. But it's like it's somewhat subtle. And the reason that they're called the club-tailed scorpion is because it was in opposition to another group of scorpions that's their closest living relative that's called the sword-tailed scorpions. And so like those ones have a really long skinny tail and these ones have like kind of like a big dumb fat tail. But what's really cool about them is that they're able to hiss. They're able to emit this acoustic signal to warn predators to stay away, like a rattlesnake rattles. And they do that, again, you remember these structures on the bottom, the pectins that are sensory structures they use for smelling? These guys have this adapted sensory structure where it has this expanded section that's kind of like a drum head to amplify the sound. And then on the underneath side of the sensory structure, they have these little bumps on each of the individual teeth. It has like these ridges on it, and they rub it against their stomach. So it's like a kind of like a stick and washboard situation, but they do that on themselves. So it's like what is the name of that stick and washboard? It has like a term, like a musical term, but I can't think of what it is.
This might, is it? It's not. No, never mind. I'm not even gonna guess because it's just gonna. But I know what you mean. Yeah.
I should look it up one day.
Yeah, they gave the kids in music class who couldn't play anything else. They were like, here. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they have this stick and washboard and they rub it over their stomach and it goes like shh, 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 shh. And like you're like immediately like, I don't know what that is, but I should probably stay away, which is what they're hoping you do because they don't want to use that precious venom for defense. They want to use it for capturing their prey. Mm-hmm. And they're found in northeastern South America as well as the Caribbean. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, they're really cool.
Okay, next is another species of scorpion that I don't study, but I find really intriguing. And this is the ghost scorpions, which is like the term for the general group of scorpions. The one that I'm going to show you a picture of is Coryllis celebensis. This is another family of scorpions. It's the family Coryllidae. So Coryllidae are the ghost scorpions. That's kind of like the unofficial common name that the person that's the world expert on this group is a woman named Dr. Stephanie Loria. She's currently at the American Museum of Natural History, and she's the world's expert on ghost scorpions, and she decided that she wanted to call them ghost scorpions because that was the name that some local people used in one of the places that she was doing field research. They're predominantly found in Southeast Asia and South Asia, including the Himalayas. And the reason that she found that name to be so apt, so fitting, is because they are one of the few groups of scorpions that don't fluoresce under ultraviolet light. Oh. So like scorpions universally fluoresce in ultraviolet light. Like all of them look green or blue when you shine an ultraviolet light on them. That's how we find them at night. And that's one of the reasons that we've gone from 240 to 2,400 species of scorpions in 100 years, because now we have this tool of like a portable flashlight that they shine under that we just discovered like in the 70s. But these guys, like, it doesn't work. So you can go out at night and walk around, but you're never going to find them. So the only way you can find them is through just, like, really slowly walking and flipping over logs and lifting over, like, big boulders and hoping that you'll find them. They're fossorial, so they dig. Mm. But if you do shine an ultraviolet light on them, like, first you have to know where it is, because you can't just, like, shine it around and see it. But, like, if you know where one is and you shine a UV light on it, it does fluoresce, but it's like so faint that it almost looks like the ghost of a scorpion. Like it just has this cool, like very subtle kind of hue that you see in the dark against the dark background of blue. And so it does seem very fitting, one, that they like don't really fluoresce except for this like kind of ghosty haze. Two, like they're so hard to find that it's like they're a ghost. Like you will work all day and find like one, which is like according to Stephanie, a very successful day. Like a successful week would be to find like one. So a successful day is finding one. And so they're just kind of like this like legend of scorpions. Yeah. They're like the legend. And they're also like super tiny, like this big.
And 3, it just sounds really awesome.
Yeah, it sounds pretty awesome. Ghost scorpions.
Well named. Metal. Yeah.
It's like the Israeli death stalker. There's another scorpion called man killer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, when was the Israeli Deathstalker named?
These common names, like, I don't really know exactly where they come from because
Okay.
I don't make up common names. I just make up scientific names. So
Yeah.
I think it must have come from, I don't know if it was like a local name that was translated into English, or I don't know. But the one that's called man killer, that one's found like in a lot of like southwestern Asia and southeastern Europe, like Greece. And that one, the name comes from the Latin. The Latin is Androctonus, which is Latin for man killer, and it is like straight up a man killer. Like it can it does some damage.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Also, Lorraine, thank you, Lorraine, helpfully Googled this washboard instrument we're talking about, and apparently it's called the washboard. So.
Oh, awesome! Great. I'm glad I got the name down solid.
Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we only have one left?
Yeah. Is that sad, right?
It is. Although we do have some really good questions. So.
Okay. So the last one, I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but I like it for a few reasons. In part because they're actually super super docile scorpions that basically don't sting ever. Like I've never seen one sting, and they're really cool looking. It's the African flat rock scorpion. It's from southwestern Africa, like Namibia, South Africa. Hadrogenes troglodytes is the scientific name, and that's because the troglodyte comes from cave living, and they live in the cracks between rocks, in rock outcroppings in the arid southwest of Africa, and they fit into these little crevices and go back and live in these rock outcroppings, and so their body is super dorso-ventrally flattened. Here's a picture of it. This is a top-down picture, so you can't tell just how flat they are, but they basically look like somebody took a scorpion and smushed it. And I just think they're super cute, and they're from what family are they? Hemiscorpiidae. So yet another family of scorpions, and just kind of epically awesome. I also have one. I don't people always ask me if I have pet scorpions, which my usual answer is no, but I do have a lab mascot, based on a popular demand for us to have a lab mascot because everybody wants to just see these scorpions because they're cute.
Breakfast Club viewers, please welcome Tina.
Yeah, so this is Tina, and Tina is an African flat rock scorpion, and don't crawl off this rock because I want you to stay on it, please. Thank you. I wanted to have a background for her. Okay.
Oh, to make her look extra great.
Yeah, to make her look extra great.
She looks pretty good.
Adorable. Yeah. She's and you can see when I hold her sideways, she's really flat. She looks like a little scorpion pancake. And they often engage in that kind of sit and wait behavior that I talked about in the beginning of the talk, where they just sit at the opening of their little rock crevice with their tiny little claws poked out and just wait for something to walk by. And so their little tiny claws are covered in hairs. They're super, super sensitive to motion. And this little
we can actually see her little hairs against your shirt.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
She's like a fuzzy little lady.
She really is.
And just flat as a pancake. She also, one of the things that I love about her in particular is that she has a deformation. Which is a weird thing to love about something, I guess, but it makes her more special. And she has, if you can see right there, she has one leg that it's right on the edge of the white in between her last leg and her second leg. And it terminates after the first segment with two little tarsal claws. So it's not actually cut off or anything. It actually just is only partially developed.
Can we look straight in her eyes again one more time?
You want to gaze into her eyes?
Yeah, I do. Oh.
Look at that little scorpion face.
It's a great view of her. Thank you.
All right, let me put her back down into this
terrarium. All right, I'm gonna ask you, do you have any like hard stops? Are we okay to ask a handful of these
Yeah, sure.
time-wise? Okay, great. So Willie was curious about his question is, what is your estimate of species richness of scorpions in North America?
Ooh, scorpions in North America. I would say, like, I guess my first question is, in North America, are you inclusive of Mexico? Because if so, like, for sure, highest species richness in the world. Probably on the order of 500 to 700 species, inclusive of Mexico. If we're just talking about the U.S., I think the U.S. has about 150 species.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of those being in California, or at least
Okay.
50% of them are in California.
Wow. So Vicky asked, where in the world can you find the most scorpions in one place? Would that be Mexico?
The most, I guess, like, so there's two questions. The first is the most
Oh, yeah.
species.
Right.
And the most species, I guess I would bet Mexico probably has the most species richness.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most abundance of like individual scorpions.
Just crawling with scorpions.
I mean, like, I would say that North American deserts are really, really super dense. The reality is, like, I haven't been everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's probably some places, like, I've heard from other scorpion researchers that in Central Asia, like, there are just scorpions everywhere. And they're so dense and there's so many. There's not like a ton of species diversity. Like, there'll only be like 2 or 3 species in any given place, but there's just like a ton of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like probably one of the like larger, like overall body like mass of desert biodiversity, at least for animals in some deserts, is scorpions.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Biomass.
Yeah.
Although like people say that the highest biomass of deserts is termites. That's so I don't know if they can compete with termites, but there's a lot of them anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Neat. So Dulce wanted to know whether scorpions and pseudoscorpions are closely related.
They are, because they're both arachnids, but they're pretty distantly related on the arachnid tree of life. So yes, but no.
Okay.
They do look superficially similar. The cool thing about some pseudoscorpions, well, there's 2 awesome things about pseudoscorpions. So first is that some of them are phoretic, which means that they like grab onto other animals to disperse themselves, to transport themselves. And usually what they grab onto is big beetles or birds, and they like let themselves get flown around. They're super tiny. They're like fingernail width size.
Okay.
And then the other super cool thing is some of them have venom glands inside their claws. So they like use their claws to envenomate prey.
Wow. Is that common or unusual?
It's just in one lineage of them.
Okay.
So not all pseudoscorpions, just one lineage, and that's like yet another evolution of venom in the arachnid tree of life. So like venom is evolved in spiders, in scorpions, and in pseudoscorpions.
Yeah. Okay. That's really neat. And we had, for people, there were a bunch of people who I think tuned in a little later and had questions about that you sort of spoke to already, but they were wondering why scorpions fluoresce. And I think you said that we don't really know. There's multiple theories, but
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we know functionally how it works. It's a pigment called coumarin that's embedded in their exoskeleton that excites light. But we don't know, like, functionally what it does, like how it benefits them or doesn't benefit them.
Okay. So D Squared wanted to ask or know whether scorpion taxonomy is now all based on genomics, and if so, what you look at.
It is not. By and large, like most scorpion taxonomists that are alive and working today are using morphology, the same, like anatomy, the same as people have always done. There's like increasing incorporation of genetics into taxonomy, and that ranges from like people including what's called a DNA barcode, which is like a short sequence of like a short universal gene in animals that people include. It's called cytochrome oxidase 1, that like evolves at about the same rate that species evolve, and so each species has a unique DNA sequence of CO1. So people sometimes include that now, and then the main way that people are using genetics in scorpion research at the moment is that they're doing like building evolutionary histories using genetics. So doing like
Right.
ancestry.com using genes for scorpions to try to build a scorpion family tree. So that's the
Right.
primary way that we're using, like in terms of the field of taxonomy, which I would argue also includes the way that things are related to one another, or like what is a family and what goes in that family, is building trees of life with genetics.
Right. Okay. Litz was curious, with the scorpions that drop their tails, couldn't they regenerate their tails and the ability to poop if they molted in time?
No, so like many arachnids, like tarantulas, for example, if they molt, they'll regrow their legs. Like if a leg's been broken off or something, and whip scorpions, which is another lineage of arachnids, will regenerate their whips if their whip gets broken when they molt. Scorpions don't regenerate anything. So if anything breaks on a scorpion, when they molt, it doesn't grow back ever.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before, but it seems like it would have been a good added skill to pick up.
Should have, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't the one to lose of all the skills.
Sally wanted to know, how do you actually, so I think what she's asking, she says, how do you actually study scorpions? I assume you have to pick them up somehow.
Yeah, I pick them up. When I'm out in the field, like typically I handle scorpions with forceps, like long tweezers. Like I use ones that are like, I don't know, like 10 inches long, because it like gives me some leverage and makes sure that like when they try to pinch me as I'm holding them by the tail with the forceps, they don't reach my hand, because then I scream and drop everything. I don't know why. It's like a reaction that I can't stop myself from doing.
Yeah, but it looks super, it still looks very professional when it happens. Like you shouldn't be embarrassed by it at all.
Because what happens is they like grab on with their claws, and their claws are really strong, and then they like wrench themselves out of the forceps, and then they sting you, and that's not something I want. So yeah, I use forceps. That is the answer.
Okay.
And then like everything, scorpions don't cooperate with being looked at under a microscope for hours on end. So when we are studying scorpions, typically the scorpions that we're studying are specimens from museum collections that are preserved in alcohol, so they are easy to handle.
Okay. Celeste said, you mentioned that Scorpiology used to be male dominated. Does that mean it's no longer the case?
No, it doesn't mean that. It's still male dominated. I hope one day it is not. It's like, I think, there's 20 people or so that are like really active scorpion biologists on Earth today. And of those, there's 2 women.
All right. So we
or
need
at least
some
active in scorpion taxonomy. Yeah.
Right.
Which is what I was referring to when I talked about the woman.
Yeah. Okay, so we need some more. So everybody head over there.
Yes, please.
Jessica asked whether scorpions can survive in pipes, and I think maybe she's thinking water.
So scorpions can survive submergence in water. In fact, there's one of the species that I was considering for my top 10 list is an intertidal species of scorpion that can survive up to 12 hours of submergence in high tide. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't find a good picture of it, so I didn't include it. But yes, they can survive being in water. Yeah, no, up to 12.
Oh, 12.
There's another species of scorpion that lives in salt flats that are seasonally flooded in Australia. Mm-hmm. Pistacanthus leptura. No, I can't remember what species of Pistacanthus, but at any rate, it like lives in these salt flats that get flooded during rainy season, and they stay flooded for like months, and it just lives there. It doesn't leave.
Oh wow.
It just stays under the salt crust, and like actually they eat like birds that are migrating and like stop at the seasonal pool to like feed. Like they grab their little bird legs and drag them underwater. It's like terrifying.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of eating things, Megan would like to know if any scorpions are edible.
So people do eat scorpions. They are like I said earlier, like super nutrient rich. Like a nice little. It's like eating shrimp, kind of. I mean, like underneath that exoskeleton is just like solid muscle, essentially. So people do eat scorpions. Like the most common places are Asia, and people like for some reason there's like a thing in Greece right now in like tourist places where there's pizzas with scorpions on them. I keep getting pictures.
It's because of Instagram, probably.
Yeah, it's like a popular thing at the moment. That's like the main places that I know of that like where people are relying on scorpions as a protein source.
Mhm.
Because like in some of the species that breed and reach maturity pretty rapidly, like it would be a pretty sustainable
Mhm.
protein source. Not nearly as sustainable as like crickets because crickets have such a faster maturity, so like a higher turnover. But yeah, I don't know. Could be an option.
Yeah. Okay. Jessica would like to know, how many times have you been stung?
Once, exactly one time. And I was stung by like a local species of scorpion we have here in the Bay Area and throughout a lot of Northern California, the Pacific forest scorpion. And it doesn't have any venom that's harmful to humans. It felt like a thumbtack, and I got stung because I had passed it from like one grubby 5-year-old to another about 50 times, and it like was like, that is enough. You will
Yeah,
not pass me one more time.
that seems fair. Okay. Well, I think that, yeah, so many people are so into this presentation and saying thank you to you. And I think, oh, do you get a lot of people asking? There's like several people are basically like, I found X color scorpion in X place. Is it dangerous? Do you get a lot of that?
Well, one thing that's like a for sure thing that happens to me constantly is when I'm out in the field, like I always talk to local people, like every local person that I can, and I like, have you seen scorpions around here? Like, what do they look like? You want to come with me, like out on your property to look for them? Like, I'd love for you to. Anyways, universally, like hands down, the thing that people say to me is like, "Oh yeah, there's some big black scorpions," and I'm like, "Oh, big black ones, huh?" Because like there's actually not that many species of black scorpion.
Right.
There's just like a handful of black scorpions. Like most scorpions are some hue of brown or tan,
Uh-huh.
and so like the big black scorpion is like ubiquitous across Earth.
Right. It's like what every scorpion in our brain turns into when it's not in front of us.
And I always am like trying to figure out like what are they talking about? Like what did they see that they think is a scorpion that's like gigantic and black?
Yeah.
I still haven't figured it out, but something out there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. It says a lot of, yeah, it says more about us than anything else.
I mean, the answer, here's my answer.
Okay.
If you live in California, there's no scorpions that are dangerous. If you live in most of the U.S., there's, with the exception of Arizona, there's no scorpions that can harm you. If you're in Arizona and you have small children, like the scorpions that get into your house are typically the Arizona bark scorpions. Like, take them out, smash them with a shoe. I mean, I'm not
Get a black
advocating
light.
for like mass murder, but like get a black light. You can check your house super easily. You'll see them if you turn it on at night. Put out sticky traps. They'll crawl in the sticky traps and get stuck. If you live in Canada, there's no dangerous scorpions. If you live in Mexico, and sorry, but you're kind of like SOL. There's lots of scorpions. A lot of them can do you some harm. There's about six to 10 species in Mexico, depending how you slice species, that are dangerous to humans. Most of those are restricted to western Mexico. So if you're in eastern Mexico, you're probably okay. If you're in most places on Earth, you're probably okay.
Okay.
The answer to that question. Most places, you're probably okay.
Okay. Well, we have this one from Angela, who is clearly in the Bay Area, and I thought it was a nice one to kind of wrap up with. She says, we'd love to take a black light out on a night walk and try to find scorpions. Is this a safe thing to do for scorpion newbies? Do you have any tips?
It is totally safe to do. The biggest problem with, so first, black lights, like if you're in the US, you can find black lights at like Home Depot. Like black lights are pretty widely available. You can also find them like on Amazon or like just Googling like UV flashlight. They're handheld, they're portable, they take AA batteries. They're a super fun thing to do if you're out camping or just like want to look in your neighborhood or a park by your house. If you're in the Northeast US, like there's no scorpions, so don't bother. But if you're in like most of the West Coast or Southern US, there's lots of scorpions. They're pretty much everywhere. You will find, I guarantee you'll probably find some. The tricks are you walk slow. You look for things that are glowing green. You'll probably find all sorts of stuff, especially plastic, because it also tends to glow. But go look at all the things that are glowing, like go closer and look at them. And Scorpions are small, so if you're looking for something giant, that's not what it looks like. It's going to be like this big, like 1 or 2 inches long, small little thing. And the most important tip is like black lights are really dim, so it's hard to see anything else. So what I would recommend is if you're out for a hike at night, and especially in a place that you're unfamiliar with, is that you have somebody walk in front that has a regular light, and like watch out for things that you'll trip over, or like rattlesnakes in the middle of the road, or other things that could be more dangerous, because that's like you don't want to fall or trip or step on a rattlesnake because you didn't see it.
Right. And if you do any of those things, you definitely don't want to say that we told you to do them. So yeah, walk with a light.
Yeah, I love like just having somebody walk in front of me with a light, and like you can trade off, like one person can walk in front in one direction and one person can walk in front in the other direction.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I thought that was such a nice question to end with is because if you are interested in scorpions, and especially if you are interested in going out and looking for scorpions, come right back to Breakfast Club on Tuesday, because Lauren will be coming back along with the co-directors of our citizen science team and our new botany curator. And we're going to be talking to you about California Biodiversity Day and about a trio of projects that our researchers are working on that we would really love your help in contributing to in easy ways that we will explain. So yeah, do you want to tell us just like a tiny preview of your project?
Well, I showed you that picture earlier by Procrete. I'm working with Procrete and another young student who's an arachnid enthusiast named Harper Forbes. And the three of us, along with a few other people, are working on documenting all the species of scorpions in California. California is a biodiversity hotspot, and we'd like your help. So come back and hear all about how you can help us better understand scorpions in California.
Yeah. So that's again Tuesday at 10 a.m. And yeah, before I sign off, I'll just mention that if you, this is the kind of I give this kind of spiel every week now, but the Academy, like a lot of other museums and other institutions around the world, is really, really hard hit by the pandemic right now. And we're about to enter our 6th month of being closed. So if you are able to comfortably give, there's a link for the Academy Relief Fund in the description on YouTube, and there's a button for it on Facebook, and we would love it. If you are not able to comfortably give, don't give it another thought. Please just keep watching our programs and interacting with us here, and that's wonderful and really important support as well. So with that, Lauren, thank you so much. That was unbelievably cool, and I learned a lot too. And we'll see you all on Tuesday. Take good care, and thank you. Bye.
Bye.